Hi everyone, this is Rob. I'm assisting Dusty with the programming class, and I wanted to take you through a few tips on number 5, which is the fifth project that you're going to be working on, and it gets a little hairy. So I wanted to kind of go through some of the things that I discovered in this project and give you some tips because it's not covered in the book terribly well. Nor is it covered in his supporting videos and so forth. So before I do that, let me bring up the simulator here real quick and show you that this is the sort of finished product. I've got the change working fine. It brings up the different graphics and it does curls and those types of things. The move, once I reload the simulator, let me actually rebuild this real quick because it's gotten a little bit funky on me here, but let's try running that again. We'll compile that and run that again, bring up that simulator, and we'll rerun that. So I've got it mostly working. It's about 90% functional. It's not completely functional. I've still got a few kinks. I'll tell you about those here in just a second, but the move is kind of working. The shrink is kind of working, but it's not obviously shrinking correctly. It's sort of jumping around a bit. So I'm 90% there. I'm still kind of working out a few of the kinks, but I'll get to those. But at least I can, it compiles and it runs and it does most of what it's supposed to do. It's just some simple attributes somewhere. So this is the, let me go ahead and go full screen with this so we can see this a little bit better. So there's 3 files you're going to be working with: the nib file, the implementation file, and the header file. And the nib file and the header file are super easy. It's the implementation file that gets a little bit crazy, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So let's bring up the nib file first. Well, before we do that, let's make sure that he gives you all of the supporting files that you need, the wallpapers and the icons and so forth, and you put those into the supporting files list. And if you go into the touches plist, this is where you put the icon here under the item 0. That is what creates the icon for the phone. That is what, if I go back here, that's that right there. So that's what actually creates the icon. So you could put Quirky Hornet and other things in there. And by the way, there's a website that you can upload graphics to create the gloss effect just for phone applications. So that works out really well if you're interested. Okay, so that's the plist. Let me go back up full screen. So the nib file, again, this is the storyboard file, and if this is probably the place that if there's ever going to be a problem with the compilation where it compiles and it aborts, you get the SG abort, it's going to be here. And it's going to be here because of these outlets. Either the outlets are not associated correctly, or there's too many of them, or not enough of them. So if you highlight, you can see over here on the right hand side, there is, if I click this arrow right here, you can see this list and that little right arrow. And these are the events. And sometimes these events are not associated with anything. So there won't be anything highlighted under touch up, which is a user's touching the shrink button or move or change. So these will not be highlighted, or somebody will have hit the X and killed that particular touch-up event. So it's really easy to reassociate that. What you'll do is hover over the little empty, what will be an empty circle on the right-hand side, hold the Command key down on the keyboard, and drag over to the file's owner. It'll create a line. It'll literally create a line from here to the file's owner, and then release the Command key, and it will associate that event with that button. So if there's going to be a problem when you compile and things are not clicking or working, my strong suggestion to you is to just bring up the nib file, click on the buttons, and just make sure that the touch-up inside event is associated correctly with the file's owner. And then when you drag it over, there'll be 3 options. There'll be shrink, move, and change, and you'll want to associate the change button with the change file's owner, and the move with the move, and the shrink with the shrink. Okay, so it's real simple to do. Okay, awesome. The header file over here is very simple to construct. This won't take you half an hour or less, and that's and that's with some errors to get this all coded in correctly. You drag the buttons onto the screen. That's what actually creates the the outlet, and so the action rather. So you'll create an IB action for shrink, an IB action for move, an IB action for change, and you have to code in the properties. The retain and non-atomic has to do with memory management on the system. It's really important, really important to make sure that you have semicolons at the ends of these things. That's, if you're missing a semicolon, you'll get all sorts of weird, nasty errors, and it'll be real frustrating. And don't worry about it, we all get them. And the case sensitivity is very important as well. So anything that you do, make sure that you use the same case sensitivity all the way through. So if you call something background, capital B background, use that consistently. If you call the icon my icon with a lowercase m, make sure you use that consistently. Okay, so that is the header file. That's a piece of cake. The nib file and header file, easy pleasy, no problem there. The implementation file, let me go back to the nib file. You can actually go backward and forward through your files by clicking over here on this upper thing right here, and you can zip back and forth. So here's the implementation file, and it looks kind of crazy, but actually when you break it down, it's not as bad as it looks. This is the array, and the array basically holds or stores all the images that are going to rotate. Those are the background images. And so he kind of goes through how to create the little array. And I remember when I was taking my first programming class, I was always intimidated by arrays, but it's really not. All it is just basically a library of images that rotate, kind of a collection. It's real simple. This is all boilerplate stuff here. Let me kind of go down here. This is what this little string right down here is what changes the orientation of the interface. So when a person changes their phone from horizontal to vertical, the orientation changes to match it correctly. So that's how people code the orientation change, and that works for iPad or iPhone. Down here, starting here, this is all the shrink stuff. This is shrink button stuff right there. That's what controls the shrinking. And this is where I've got some problems. I'm trying to figure out where my problem is here and trace that back. It works, but it doesn't work correctly, so I've got something wrong there. But this is just controls whether it's shrunk or not shrunk, and moved or not moved, that sort of thing. And then down here is the move stuff, moving it to different parts of the screen, and these are the XY coordinates where it moves. And again, I've got something amiss in mind I'm still trying to figure out, but it basically works. And then down here is the change, which does work fine. All of this stuff changes the backgrounds. So there's three parts: change, move, and shrink. And so you take those three things out, and it's really not much at all. And there's the array. So it's not as bad as it may seem, really. It's just that we have three buttons doing three things. So there's three different sets of commands. And when you get ready to compile this, when you build it and run it, it'll come back with errors, and it'll throw up little red things on the side. Click on those, and you'll get a debugger that comes across the bottom. Usually it'll come up with suggestions to fix it. It'll actually fix it for you, which is kind of cool. Or you can view the debugger, which I've done a few times. I've actually been able to grab the code off the debugger, or the message, put that into Google, and check with some programmers to figure out where I've messed up, and they've actually helped me out a lot. Just finding that other people are having the same errors, and you can usually sort of figure things out by grabbing the debug error and just Googling it and figuring out. And then they're saying, oh, you've got a problem on your nib file with this button or something. So that's really the process. Again, three files: the nib, the implementation, and the header file. Header file easy, nib file easy, implementation file. Once you figure out that you're just dealing with basically three sections: move, shrink, and change, then I think you can kind of get your head around a little bit better. Just make sure that you use the proper syntax and the proper case. It's very case sensitive, so be really careful about the case sensitivity, because it'll throw you. And these little curly brackets. If you're missing a curly bracket, especially when it comes down here when you're closing these statements off at the very end, that can throw errors as well if you're missing curly brackets. So make sure you've got that as well. And it'll usually squawk at you if you're missing a curly bracket, so it's really easy to fix those. Most of the errors are easily fixable. It's usually syntax errors. So I'm going to post this code out on the Moodle site later today, and so you'll have access to it, so you can always just grab my code if you're having your frustrations, and then maybe you can help me figure out where I'm getting the move and the shrink incorrect. We can trace those back together, but for the most part, that is it. Oh, and by the way, these little things over here on the side are kind of cool because these tell you, if you hover over them, it tells you exactly what they are controlling, which is kind of nice. Those are actually little button icons, if you will. So that those are some things that he just does not cover. He doesn't cover any of this stuff over here in the book, and he just puts the code in and compiles and it runs magically. But the events over here sometimes are not associated correctly. So if I can give you any words of advice, it's to highlight the button and to make sure, highlight that little arrow right there and make sure that the event is set correctly. Okay, and the other thing you can check for too, I just forgot about this, is, okay, so that's the class is set correctly, so we're okay on that. So it's usually over here under this button right here. That's usually where the problem lies. If you've drug that button over multiple times, it will create multiple versions, and you need to just hit the X right there to kill the multiple versions of that, or you'll get the SG abort error because it doesn't know which of those events to actually run. So you just want one file owner for each button. If you see more than one, then hit the Xbox, that little X thing there, and kill that extra event. So hopefully that helps. I'll be around to help as well on the discussion boards. And again, I'll post this code so that it is available for you as well.